Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. This has been a very hard week for many of us, perhaps especially those of us living in the United States, and especially people of color. Watching the national death toll from the pandemic climb above 100,000 is horrific. Seeing our communities begin to open at a time when, in my county and others, the numbers just aren't dropping yet is scary. It makes it all too easy to internalize our social distancing, to allow ourselves to feel somewhat protected as long as we stay in our houses, away from everyone. Yes, staying in our houses protects not just us, but all the people with whom we might come into contact if we were out and about. But it can be awfully tempting to turn inwards and just think about our own problems, our own emotions. I know I'm not the only one who has gotten absorbed in my own problems, be that a plumbing emergency like I talked about last week, or the soreness I have in both my arms, which I'm hoping is just tendinitis, or even when I'm thinking about my spouse's illness. Even in the most difficult moments in my family's life, I know we are privileged enough to have easier lives than many people in this world, and I struggle at moments to remember that fact. But sometimes the pain in our larger communities really strikes through, and this is certainly one of those times. For me, the week started with the death of Larry Kramer. I first learned about Kramer through his involvement in the service organization Gay Men's Health Crisis in the relatively early days of the AIDS pandemic. And then when I was in college in the late 1980s, Kramer started an activist organization, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, or ACT UP, with the goal of changing national healthcare policy and encouraging the funding of research to understand and treat AIDS. It was that organization that inspired my friends and many people of my generation to think about our own social activism of whatever sort in a new way. I had been minorly involved in the movement to encourage colleges to divest from South Africa, and I think that movement gained an enormous amount of strength by adopting some of the techniques of dramatic public protest that ACT UP modeled so well. I don't mean ACT UP invented them. The protests of previous generations, including civil rights movement protesters, helped Kramer and his co-activists construct their very visual way to work for change. But the service organization Gay Men's Health Crisis and the activist organization ACT UP were not Kramer's only ways to confront the combination of health crisis and discrimination he saw all around him. He was also a writer. He was a novelist, a playwright, an author of nonfiction, often about the AIDS pandemic, often about the experience of living as a gay man, part of a community of people discriminated against, and always about love of our partners and immediate communities, but also love of our world. I've been thinking about Larry Kramer all week. HIV and coronavirus have spawned very different pandemics, but just as we did during the AIDS crisis, we're at a time where the work of healthcare providers is crucial, research is critical, where the work of healthcare policy specialists is essential. At this time when some of our national leaders are treating the pandemic as merely a political game, I am very grateful that federal agencies are staffed with so many career civil servants, appointed because of their commitment to their fields, not because of their politics. For many of these folks, people who have devoted their careers to furthering the public good, the last few years have not been easy. Some have always voted Republican, some have always been Democrats, and some are independents. But almost all of them care most about their work, not about partisanship. Many have stayed in their jobs because they know how important their work is, even if it is sometimes more frustrating to confront highly politicized control from the top. And even when their progress is squashed, their ability to try to do right for the country and the world is limited or even wholly prevented. Someone I love very much is one of those public servants, a man who has devoted his life to crafting and helping to enact healthcare policy, and is working coronavirus right now. I've never been more proud of him than I am now. But I'm also heartbroken to watch him lose his own sense of pride in his actions in a government that often seems cruel and polarizing and upside down. Larry Kramer's insistence on the development of health policies to confront the pandemic around him was joined by his insistence that intolerance and injustice was deadly. Right now, here in the States, at the time we're watching this new pandemic, we're also watching a different kind of deadly injustice play out, where Black men are being murdered by police officers, being killed by people we want to believe are public servants themselves. This week's events, especially the killing of George Floyd and its aftermath, were yet more examples of the long history of deadly racial injustice that underlies the entire American project. And people in the Black Lives Matter movement are responding with the same kind of activist hope that Kramer and his friends built and ACT UP. But in this time of social distancing and quarantine, mass action has to happen in new ways. And I don't know what to do. I can't imagine where my voice would be useful at all, or how to make it heard outside my own echo chamber of mostly lefty friends. And I don't know what I could say that could make non-lefties actually feel any differently. Or honestly, if it's anything but hubris to think I could be or should be the one to convince them to feel any differently. Finally, though, I come back to the fact that through all his moments of activism, of volunteering and organizing and, quote, acting up, Larry Kramer was also writing. Writing words we'll read for a long time. Words we'll be talking about. Books that might matter even more than his street actions, potentially. And many activists and scholars today are writing about the racial injustice that has echoed through this country's history since the beginning, and thinking about how to confront it now. We all have to find our ways to act and react. Maybe you're a protester in the streets. Maybe you're a first responder or a healthcare provider on the front lines. Perhaps you're a government employee holding up the ideas of what you want your country to be, or a scientist looking for new treatment options or a vaccine. Perhaps you're a volunteer for a service agency that works with people living in poverty or people who are the victims of injustice. Perhaps you're a legislative activist, writing your congressional representatives about these issues, or a person trying to figure out how to make elections work in a time of social distancing. Maybe you're in a position where you're able to be making donations to groups in need, be they service-oriented or social justice-oriented, or even purely political. Maybe the Southern Poverty Law Center or the United Negro College Fund, or something more local to your community, or something more political or activist. Or maybe you're a writer or an actor or another kind of artist who every day helps people learn to be more compassionate by helping them understand a broader world than they know. Or even maybe you're like me. You're just a reader, a parent, and a spouse, a neighbor or a friend, or a caretaker, maybe a booktuber. Even if all you do is share love with the people around you, you're already doing the most important thing, the action that allows all the rest of what is necessary to follow. Is that a total cop-out? Is it yet another example of white privilege? Overeducated, middle class, white privilege at that? I'm afraid it is. Still, this is the time to listen, to read, to try to learn. Please go to Alba's channel, Seriella, and look at the way she's trying to listen and learn and express love. She also shares a list of important books, and many of the people who have commented on her video have added additional insights. In this country, in this world, we are facing a lot of painful times. Injustice, poverty, prejudices. unbelievably deep divisions in our political system with no signs of healing. Way too many deaths from violence, and way too many deaths from disease. Hold each other close, even if you have to do it from a distance. Thanks for joining me. See you soon.